Okay, let's take a look at one more example of invoking a theme function before we move on to creating our own theme function. Go ahead and go back to your look and feel module directory, and we're going to open up the third example, which is theme table. And like we did before, go ahead and copy the entire code and paste it into your look and feel.module file, overriding everything else. All right. Now again, we're just adding one example to the look and feel examples page function, and it's down here. And this is an example of using theme table. So theme item list and theme table are both utility functions that are used often throughout Drupal core and are also useful for administration pages where you need to output lists or tables in a very consistent way. One of the things to keep in mind when using these functions, while they're really useful, is that it makes it difficult to override these functions in the theme layer. The reason being that since it's used in so many places, it means that if somebody wants to override the list or table in just our module, that it will also override it for every other module too. So we may want to think about duplicating the functionality in these utility functions and using those as a separate theme function instead. So that's just a caveat to using these, but they can be very handy in the right situation. Okay, so we're starting by adding a heading here to delineate this example. And next we're creating an array of headers. So what we're doing basically is constructing a table in an array. Just like we did with the list, we're passing this array to the theme function. And the headers is the list of table header items that are going to run across the top of the table. Notice that we're also using the T function to translate the text in here because that's not done automatically. Next we have a set of rows array additions, and we're adding an array to each one of these items. This is a simple form of this function. There are more complex examples you can find when looking at the source code in Drupal core. But in this example, all that we're passing through this array is a list of the contents of each table cell that corresponds to the headers here. So this first item will be a link, and we're naming it theme item list. That will be the text of the link. And we're using the path, this shortened path, to the theme item list URL in api.drupal.org. And then we're giving it a description, which is generate a list of items from an array. And we're doing this for several items. These are all useful theme functions that you might use in your own module code. And then finally, we're creating the output by running the theme table through the theme function. So again, we're lopping off theme underscore and instead using the theme function and passing everything to the right of that as the first parameter. The next parameter is the array of settings that we're passing to the theme table function. In this case, we're taking two parameters. One is the header, which we're passing the headers array to, and the second is the rows, which we're passing the rows array to. Finally, we're returning this. Let's go ahead and save the module, and then go to our browser and refresh our examples page. Now if we scroll down, we'll see a table here, along with a list of links to these various API function calls with a description. Even in this very simple invocation of theme table, we see a couple of nice things. First of all, it looks pretty. So all of the right classes have been added to this table to give it the right look and the right padding. Secondly, we also have striped rows. And if you've ever implemented this before, you know it requires some logic. So we're leveraging code that already exists in Drupal core and simply passing the raw data to the theme table function and getting what we need. These two examples really demonstrate the essence of how theme functions should be used within your module. So let's go back to the code real quick and take a look at this. What we're doing in these two examples is boiling down what gets passed to the theme function to simple data and configuration. So in the case of our items list, we're passing in a list of items, which is the data, and the title, which is data, but also the type, which is a type of configuration. In the table example, we're just passing it the data that's going to be shown in the header items and the data that will be filled in to the table cells. Everything else is implemented behind the scenes, and all of the markup that gets added to this table is instead done within the theme function itself. So if somebody wants to override how this table is output, all they need to do is override the theme function.